All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about line types and line uses, we've already used expressive line, at least in a more controlled manner than what we were just discussing with the notes, but we've used expressive line to establish the basic shapes using blocking, right? These are quick lines that create movement, right? They're establishing some of the boundaries. Now, the other two types of line that we're going to be working with, structural and contour. Structural lines are exactly what that means. We're looking at the structure. So I want to go back into these forms now, and I want to kind of flesh them out a little bit better, right? If I look closely at the flower pot, I can see that the flower pot has a thickness, right? The rim here, see that black ellipse? That's the glaze on the top that shows the thickness of the wall of the clay. I don't have that here, so I need to put that in. So in dealing with structural line, I'm going to come in, again, I'm just going to lightly, that's a very, very light line. It looks dark, but it's not. You can see it. I'm making it so you can see it. I'm going to come in and use a structural line. All right, slowly moving that line across and then bending the ellipse here. And then coming around the front and coming to here. Now you might say, well, you're just outlining, Mr. Amy. I'm sort of outlining, okay? I'm representing the thickness of the structure. So I'm going to eventually, I'm going to be looking at the areas of light and dark, the shading on this, right? So when I do that, I'm going to be dealing more with contour line. So for structural line, for purposes of getting structural line, don't darken it too much, okay? Especially here. So if I see this edge right here, let's look at the value, and we're going to talk more about this eventually anyway, but you see this color gray right here and this color gray right here in the background? They're very similar. And you notice that the side wall of the flower pot there does not have a really, really dark line. So I need to be able to see that, so that when I use the structural line to kind of flesh this object out a little bit more, I don't really make a dark outline on that, so it doesn't look like a cartoon. All right? The line that I actually have here is actually pretty good for the variation of the color difference between this part of the subject and the background. Okay? So I'm going to now draw the thickness. So I can see that black ellipse there is the darkness of the clay wall, and it's very, very close here, and then when it gets to the ellipse, it gets a little bit wider. Again, because it's up by my eye level. Notice I'm drawing longer lines. They're not sketchy lines. They're more structural and a little bit more rigid. So that gives me the thickness of the top of the pot. Now I can see that the pot has a little bit of a rounded edge here. It's not sharp. So when I lightly draw that, I'll lightly draw the roundness of that down, and then it rounds in. Right? This rounds in. It's not a sharp corner right there. So I'm going to keep that light also as I come across for that structural line for the rim. All right, and again, this line is actually very, very light, so I'm not going to do much more on that line. Now I'm going to use the structural line to define the edge of the pot. Remember, it's inside a little bit of the rim. And I'm coming down on the angle that I created. And then the same thing here. Got to make sure that that stays as straight as possible and it hits where I made that hash mark before. If I need to restate the line, because it looks like it's coming in a little too far, right, the mirror image for this, I can just restate that line because it's light enough. I can erase it. And then I'm just going to restate that angle a little bit more accurately over there. And that makes it, visually, that makes it appear stronger. So you might say, oh, well, I'm just going to go in and outline everything. No, that's not what we're doing. We're adding the structure of the form so that it no longer just looks like a series of basic shapes and blocking techniques. Now, I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to erase the other blocking lines right now. I want to leave them because they're still an important part of what we're doing here. All right, but I'm just going to look for any restatements that I need. Now, what I can do is, since it's part of the structure, I can do some of the detailing. I'm also keeping the detailing light. All right, keep your pencil lines light whenever you're doing any kind of layout. Now, these lines here, the flower petals, don't do them yet, all right, because there's a reason. They're a different type of line. I'm going to show you that first. These are all fairly solid structural lines. And these, based on the definition, long flowing gestural marks to define areas of light and dark, in this case to define the detailing of the contour of those flower petals, or those leaves, these are contour lines. So I'm going to have the thickness of those contour lines established, and it's a long flowing gestural mark that I'm using now. All right. So I'm doing the detailing here with contour line. See, I didn't even pick up my pencil when I made that mark there. Alright, so that is the structural representation of that pot. Now as I move over to my teapot, I have a pretty good overall, based on the blocking techniques, I have a pretty good overall representation of the teapot. But I want to just kind of push back some of the details here. I already have the rim set up, I have the handle set up, but I'm missing the loops here. Alright, these hook loops that come in from underneath. So that's going to kind of come up, and then there's that circle that goes through. Right, that's the circle here where this hook goes through. And it comes out on the other side, like that. Same thing on this side, it's a little bit shallower, just kind of goes up in front. There's a little hole there, and it goes through that hook. Now, the rest of this, I already put these hips in, or the shoulder here, right? There's that little bit of the shoulder. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of pull that down from the shoulder and make sure that this stays straight and then hits on that little hip at the bottom. Same thing over here. I'll continue down from where that shoulder line is. I have to make sure that this stays vertical because it's a cylinder. And I'll hit the little hip, and I'll just tighten up ever so slightly the structure of the base ellipse, the ground line ellipse. And that looks it's about it. I'm not going to worry right now about all those little chips, the paint chips and the flecks and stuff, because I've got a pretty good structure right now of that form. So let me continue the process on my other 4 sketches. So I'm going to add the detailing in now. This is important on this green bottle. All right, very important that we look at the form. Now, the form itself, we can see I have the height, and I have my ellipses set up where they need to be. This is going to be another ellipse right here. I've got to look at the form. So I have the sphere. Notice this wrapping around the glass, this textured stuff. That's the widest part of the bottle. When I draw that, I have to make sure that I show the separation between the glass and this that's wrapping around the glass. You can see there's a gap. So the glass ends here and then this comes out from it. So what I mean by that is the glass comes down and then this comes off of the glass like that. So I need to make sure that I represent that on this when I do the structural line drawing. So I'm going to start up around at the top, and I can see that there's a little bit of a collar right here on the bottle. So it kind of curves in this way, and again it's above my eye level. So it kind of has that rim there. Now as it comes down, you can see it's following that cylinder, but when it gets to the cone, it starts to curve. So it has that outward curve here. So again, I'm going to keep this line light. It needs to stay vertical. And then when I get here, I just make that bend. And as I get to here, I stop. Because again, we need to make sure that we're showing that gap between the glass and where the stuff that's wrapped around the glass comes up. So I'm going to do the other side now. Again, keep your lines light. Don't press hard to make them look like a cartoon outline. And I stop there. Now I have the ellipse already set up. So I'm going to put that ellipse in lightly, and that's where I'm going to make that little bump out right there. Then I can follow the shape of the sphere that I've already drawn. Alright, so just a few sketchy lines, not a lot. I'm doing sketchy lines as opposed to a single flowing structural line because I'm trying to match the best possible representation of the ellipse, or of the sphere below it, right? I'm trying to have the mirror image as I do this on each side. Keep your lines light. Alright, now at this point here, this is where we have that wrapping that comes around it. And notice the cone on the base. You notice these points on the cone? They're curved. Alright, so right now we've got that at a point. So obviously when I go to put that in, I'm going to need to curve the base. So it comes around this way and then curves down to that ellipse. Same thing on this side. So it's coming down from that point and curving at the base. And now I have my ground line established accurately with the correct ellipse right there. And then maybe just tweak that as needed. Now I have these two pieces of string that wrap around here. So I'm going to draw those two pieces of string. You see how they're coming off of the edge of it? I have that string that comes up and wraps around the bottle. That's actually a contour line because it follows the contour of the glass and goes around the bottle this way. And then there's another part of it up here. Just like that. Again, I'm not going to do any of the detailing in here yet. I want to have accuracy in the structure of that object. Next. This one is similar to the teapot. Pretty much done. I have the ribs that separate the sections. I have some work that I do need to do on these ellipses right here. So I got to kind of pull them out, tweak them a little bit, make that a little bit more accurate as far as the shape at the base. Alright, my spout is okay, my lid is okay. Now I got to look for the handle. So again, the top of the handle is going to be here. Bottom of the handle is going to be here. So I put those little reference marks in. I can see that where the bottom of the handle meets the body is about here. And here it comes up. And this is a contour line because the contour of the handle, the shape of the handle, is defining that contour. So that's a light contour line that represents the inside of the handle. And then this line comes up to the hinge. You see that hinge is actually a cylinder. It's actually a little bit flatter. I made it on too sharp of an angle. Alright, that right there is kind of going on almost a horizontal plane like this. And then it comes up, attaches to the lid. Now I've got the contour at the bottom of that handle. That handle also, it's kind of tough to see in this print, but that handle is a flattened rectangle. So it has depth. You can see the side of it here and the flat bottom part of it. So I have the inside edge and the outside edge. So it has two surface planes. Okay? So it's as if I was looking at a shape that was a rectangle. This is the inside surface plane, and then this is the outside surface plane. It would be like this. Okay? So I'm just kind of drawing a cross section of that shape. And that's pretty much it for the structure, the structural line of that form. Lastly, we've got our pitcher and our lantern. Again, pitcher is pretty much done. It's very blocky right now. My eye level, I can see that there's a little bit of a dip right here, and then it comes high and then curves. So as I flesh that out with structural line, I'm having that dip come down a little bit here, it comes up, and then it follows the opening of the pitcher right there. I don't see anything inside of it because it's above my eye level, so I don't see any part of that opening. Now the side of the pitcher comes down. Where it curves, all right, you can see where it starts to curve out is just below where I marked this handle. So as I come down, I'm going to start to curve it out so that it picks up accurately on that edge. Just a quick line, one line, and then it comes down again and goes inside of that baseline, right? This point and this point are wider. It's a contour that goes up, so that base comes down this way, and then that just kind of disappears into the base. Actually has to come in a little bit further. All right, same thing over here. As I work down from this, I can see the same thing. From that pyramid, it starts to curve right about here. So that curves out this way. And again, if I look at my line of symmetry, I'm trying to match the width. So where I had that original marking, I can see that it comes out a little further. Again, this looks like I'm outlining, but I'm just trying to get a better accuracy of the structure. And then, of course, the base. So that's the representation for now. I'm not worried about any of the lines or anything right now. I just want to get an accuracy using structural line to flesh out the form. And lastly, this is pretty much done, guys, right? If you did everything as I showed you in the demonstration video, now all I have to do is just kind of tighten some of this stuff up. So again, it looks like I'm outlining, but what I'm doing is I'm just making the structure a little bit more solid and a little bit more accurate, tightening up my perspective, okay? Getting more accuracy within some of these angles so that they're more visible. Like that looks like a curvy line, and if it's a bottom of a pyramid, it needs to be a straight line. Parallel line, I'm going to fix that parallel line there. And then this comes down in front, and again I have a frame. That frame, you notice, has curves on it. So I'm adapting the structure of the forms that I did with blocking, and I'm using structural line now to tighten it all up. Just line drawing. Again, there's a difference. This is a line drawing. That curve, that curve. I am not shading, just establishing better accuracy. And now, of course, I have this piece inside. I'm just doing a little bit of a contour line to show the section where the candle would sit inside the lantern. And of course I have some of these openings, shapes that I can put in. Establish the base of that. And now the handle. The handle comes from underneath. Remember, the handle has thickness. Alright, the handle is a super skinny cylinder. And that gives me structural drawings of each of my 6 objects. Alright, that is what we need to work on. I'll have the video and the photos of these things set up in the assignment.